I love a bonnet for winter, but I feel like there are so many times when I want to have my hair up in like a claw clip or a little bun, or I just like have curled my hair or something and I don't want to mess it up with the bonnet. So, solution, enter the mini bonnet. So this is a knitting pattern, super beginner friendly, super cute, so that you can have your hair however you want, but keep your ears warm this winter. This pattern was originally published in the Q4 2024 issue of Material Girls, which is a fiber art magazine. It has free knitting, crochet, and sewing patterns in every issue, along with maker profiles and some fun games and just lots of girly fun. So make sure that you check it out. The link to the free download of this magazine will be down below. To make this, you're going to need 2 strands of size 4 yarn. You're going to hold these together, which offers some cool color opportunities because you can do different colors, hold them together, and it makes just a really cool effect. But why I like it especially is because doing this just makes a nice thick fabric, which will be super warm for your bonnet, and you don't have to use such tiny needles because the yarn you're using gets a little thicker when you hold it together. You'll also need 5mm knitting needles. These can be straight or circular. I'm just going to be using circular for this example tutorial. And you'll also need a 3.75mm crochet hook. If you haven't crocheted before, don't worry, it's a very simple step and I will show you how to do it. Of course, you'll need the other essentials like scissors and a tapestry needle. Starting off, remember to hold double for the entire pattern, so that means that you're going to be pulling 2 strands of yarn off of both of your balls of yarn at the same time. Start with a slip knot and we're going to put that onto the needle and do a long tail cast on of just 3 stitches. This pattern is worked from end to end, and because the ends are pointed, we start with just a few stitches and then we're going to increase a bunch and decrease at the end. Once those 3 stitches are cast on, turn your work and we're going to start with the first row. This is held double. Remember to go through both strands of yarn with each stitch that you make. On the first stitch, knit. The second stitch is a purl stitch, and then the third stitch is another knit stitch. So for row 1, knit, purl, and then knit again. When you're done with that row, you should just have your 3 original stitches on the needle. Then turn your work and it's time to start the first increase row. These increase rows, we're going to be increasing 2 stitches, 1 on either side of the bonnet, using the make one right and make one left techniques. So knit the first stitch, and now we're going to make one right. So what you need to do here is place your needle through the bar between the 2 stitches. You're going to go from back to front, and then just like you're knitting something, you're going to knit that bar. So you're going in from the left to the right in the front and then knitting through it just like it's a knit stitch, but it'll be a lot tighter and kind of harder to get through because it's like not actually a real stitch. This will make a right leaning increase so that your stitches are all aimed in a nice looking direction when you're done with them. Knit the next stitch, and then we're going to do basically the opposite thing and make one left, and this is going to make a left leaning decrease. So take your left hand needle and go through the bar between your stitches from the front to the back, and then take your right hand needle and put it through the back of that stitch and knit normally off there. So you've made a left leaning increase here. Knit that last stitch and you've just completed your first increase row. You should have 5 stitches now. Turn your work and go to row 3. This is not an increase row, so all you're going to do is knit the first stitch, purl 3 stitches, which is all of them up until the very last one, and that last stitch, knit it. You've got 5 stitches there. Turn your work and we're going to do another increase row. This is row 4. Like the other one, we're going to follow the same pattern. So knit the first stitch and then make one right into the bar between the 2 stitches, going from back to front and then shoving your knitting needle in to knit through that stitch and create a new right leaning increase. Then you're going to knit 3 and then make one left before you get to that last stitch. So that's taking your needle through the front and then your right hand needle through the back to knit and create a new stitch before knitting the very last stitch of that row. And you should now have 7 stitches on your needle. On to row 5, not an increase row again. This is going to be the back side of your work, so we're never going to increase on this side. Just knit the first and last stitches and purl everything in between. So for this row, that's knit 1, purl 5, and then knit 1 to finish. Next up, we've got another increase row. So turn your work and just like we've been doing, follow the pattern of knitting your first stitch, making a right leaning decrease, knitting up until the last stitch in the row, making a left leaning decrease, and then knitting that last stitch. By continuing to increase on each side, we're going to make that nice triangle point shape on either end of the bonnet and make sure that it's all centered perfectly. At the end of this row, you should have 9 stitches total on your needle. Then you can turn your work and do the same pattern for row 7 as well. You're going to knit the first stitch, then purl up until the last stitch, so that's 7 purls, and finally knit that last stitch. Looking good. This is the back side of your bonnet, so it should look nice and wavy. Then we have just one more increase row left. So for row 8, knit 1 stitch, make a right leaning decrease, knit 7 stitches, make a left leaning decrease, and then knit the last stitch so that you have 11 stitches total on your needle. Row 9, I bet you can guess what this looks like. Knit the first stitch, purl the next 9, and knit the last one. We are done with increasing now, so we're just gonna switch over to some good old stockinette stitch to make the body of this bonnet. So what you're going to do is on row 10, knit all 11 stitches. This is the front side of your bonnet, and you're just going to do knit stitches across that whole row. And then on the back, continue to do the same pattern that we have been doing, knitting the first stitch, purling until you get up to the last stitch, and knitting the final stitch. This is going to make this the back side of your bonnet and give a nice garter stitch edge around the whole thing. Keep alternating between the instructions for row 10 and row 11 until you've gone through row 83. So I'll meet back up with you at row 84. If you want yours to be a little longer or a little shorter, you can also try this on your head to see how long you need it to stretch from ear to ear. Just make sure to stop when you're approximately 2 inches or 5 centimeters away from your desired length, because we still need to make the other point. You're going to get some edges that are loving to roll under, which is not great, but we will block it later. I'll show you how to do that to make it all lay nice and flat. This is completely normal for stockinette stitch. For now, meet up with me back at row 84. This is going to be our first decrease row. Knit the first stitch, and then we're going to SSK the next 2 stitches. This involves slipping those 2 stitches knitwise onto your right needle, and then sticking your left hand needle through them so you can knit through both stitches. This is going to make a left leaning decrease. Knit the next 5 stitches, and then we're going to knit 2 together. So this just means to knit through your next 2 stitches like you normally would, but you're going through 2 stitches instead of 1. This will make a right leaning decrease. Finally, knit the last stitch in the row. You've just done your first decrease row, decrease 2 stitches, and you should be down to 9 stitches on your needle. Before heading to row 85, knit the first stitch, purl the next 7 stitches, and knit the last stitch. Row 86 is another decrease row, so you're going to knit the first stitch, then SSK the next 2 stitches. That stands for slip, slip, knit, which is a nice way to remember how to do this decrease. Then knit the next 3 stitches, knit 2 together to make a right leaning decrease, and finally knit the last stitch in that row. You should now be down to 7 stitches on your needle. Turn your work, and we're going to go to row 87, knit the first stitch, purl the next 5, knit the last stitch. You know the drill. Row 88 is another decrease row. Knit your first stitch, then SSK or slip, slip, knit the next 2 stitches, knit just 1 stitch, followed by a knit 2 together and knit 1. We're coming to a nice point here, almost done with our decreases. First, we need to do row 89, which is a classic pattern. Knit 1, purl 3, and then knit the last stitch on the row before turning and starting row 90. We don't have many stitches left here to decrease, so we're going to go right into an SSK right off the bat. So decrease that stitch, then just knit 1 stitch before making a final knit 2 together with the last 2 stitches, and you should have decreased now to 3 stitches, which is exactly what we want for this end point here. Lastly, just cast off those stitches using a basic cast off. I'm knitting 2, then pulling the right stitch over the left stitch, doing that 1 more time, and boom, all your stitches are already cast off. You can grab a scissors, cut that, and finish it off. Check out this nice point here. We've got one on one end, and then as you go down, you'll see an identical one on the other end, but we did one with increasing, one with decreasing. Pretty cool. It's time for our crochet trim. I'm going to be using a new color of yarn, but I'm just using 1 strand of size 4 to do this trim and a 3.75mm crochet hook. So pull off a bit, and if you haven't crocheted before, it's very simple. We're just going to do some loops over this hook to make a nice little border here. So start by inserting your hook and pulling up a loop of that yarn. You're pulling the yarn up through the edge of your knitted fabric, and you're going to take the piece of yarn that's attached to your ball, loop it over your hook, and pull that through the loop that's on the hook. This is just starting it off, and now I'll show you a simple single crochet stitch. Insert your hook through the edge, pull up a loop of yarn, loop over, and then you're gonna pull that loop through the 2 loops that are on your hook. Here that is again. So you're looping over and pulling through everything on your hook. You're gonna keep doing this over and over, and the garter stitch on the edge makes it super simple to see where you're going to insert to make this whole border around the bonnet. When you get to the points of the bonnet, you don't really need to do anything different. Just make sure you do a single crochet into the point so that you get a nice sharp triangle there, and we want it to be nice and angled. Then you can keep going. When we get to the end, all we're going to do to finish it off is what's called a slip stitch. So you're going to go into the first single crochet stitch that you made underneath that piece there, pull up a loop and to pull it directly through the loop on your hook. So it's not a full crochet stitch, it's just something that you do to connect the whole border all together. Then you can pull the yarn up through your knot and it's all finished off, looking good. Take a second to weave in any ends that you have. I'm just making sure that everything is pulled through the back of the bonnet, and then I'm going to weave it into its corresponding color just so you don't notice anything on the right side. Snip it off and it all looks nice and clean. Now it's time to make some bonnet ties. I'm going to hold my yarn double again to make these nice and thick, and since I want to use the same color, I just need to pull a bit off of my original ball of yarn, so I have 2 strands that I can pull from. Grab your crochet hook and we're going to make a simple crochet chain. So start from the very tip of the bonnet, insert your crochet hook, pull up a loop, and then literally all you have to do to make a chain is continue putting loops over and pulling them through. So I'm going to take the piece that's attached to my yarn, pull it over, and then pull it through the loop there. So over the hook, through the loop, over the hook, through the loop. It's just the same thing over and over. This is a super simple way to build up a pretty long chain over a quick amount of time. Keep going until your chain measures approximately 18 inches or 46 centimeters or whatever length you would like them to be. Then you can pull up a loop and tie off your piece and just weave the end up into the chain. I just pull it up through a few stitches until I feel like it's nice and secure, and then grab scissors to cut it off close to the edge, and it's like you wouldn't even notice that it's there. Now to sort out those curled edges, we need to do some blocking. These are my blocking mats. You can pin them to anything thick. I'm using kids' play mats. You're going to wet down your bonnet and lay it out in the shape that you want it to dry on these mats and pin it in place. I'm showing mine dry just as an example because I didn't want to get water all around my filming setup, but yours would be wet, and then I'm just making sure that all of my edges are nice and straight, especially the ones at the point, because whatever you pin it down as, it's what it's going to dry being. So you want to make sure that it's nice and flat and everything is straight and even. Once it's dry, you can unpin it and it will be completely ready to wear. I hope you enjoy your bonnet and that this tutorial was helpful. Make sure to subscribe and check out all the other free tutorials we've got on this channel. There are knitting, crochet, and sewing patterns, and even more going on materialgrrrlz.com. We have some more written patterns there, and you can check out the magazine as well. Always free, always linked down below. Make sure to tag Material Girls in your finished bonnet because I will be so excited to see them. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching.